Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited for today's conversation with Emily Barrosse. She is the founder and CEO of Bold Story Press, a publishing house for women authors who want to share their stories with the world. She spent her first 32 years of her career in the publishing industry, where she was vice president and editor-in-chief for McGraw-Hill. She signed and published hundreds of best-selling books. Emily believes that women are uniquely qualified to empower each other through sharing the stories of their experience. And she knows the world would be a better place when we achieve better balance in our culture by increasing the number of women's voices. Welcome to the show today, Emily.
Thank you so much, Felina. I'm really happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive in. Before we get to your business and the work that you're doing currently with a Bold Story Press, take us back. Talk a little bit about your background, career path, all that good stuff.
Sure. I started out in Wilmington, Delaware. Sometimes people tell me they've never met anybody from Delaware. So I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, in a big Irish Catholic family where my mother was a librarian and my father loved to read, and books and reading were a huge part of my family culture growing up. In fact, I was talking to someone about it recently, and I said it was almost like synonymous with love, because I have so many memories of my parents reading to us with their arms around us, or, us sitting at their feet. It was when my siblings and I each had our children, reading to the kids every night in bed with our arm around them was, a way that we say, I love you. So books have always been a huge part of my life. And when I graduated from college at the University of Delaware, I moved to New York to find my fortune in the big industry of publishing. And I started out as an editorial assistant, where I made $10,000 a year living in Manhattan. That I realize that dates me, but it was not a lot of money back then either. And I worked my way up through the industry and lived in lots of interesting different places. And I worked primarily in college textbooks. And I left publishing after 32 years to work for a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and then moved from there to starting a business called Bold in Business, where I was working to empower women to own their power in the business world. I loved that work. I loved the work of teaching a class to women and coaching them one-on-one, and teaching them some of the things I learned in my 32-year career about resilience, about taking risks, about courage in the workplace. So those several years that I did that business were special years. I really loved that work, but I missed publishing. And so finally, I made the decision that I wanted to go back to publishing, and this time I wanted to own the company myself. And it made sense to me, given my work in the area of empowerment, to create a platform for women only. And so in August of this year, we opened our doors, and I've been having a blast.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I want to go back a little bit. I have a few questions for you. First, I'm going to tap back into your career in publishing. Talk a little bit just about some of the broader strokes of how publishing has changed, obviously significantly, even, speeding up over the last 10 years, but throughout your career, what were some of the major themes that you saw in publishing as it changed?
Well, that's an excellent question. And you're right, of course, it has changed quite a lot. The industry, technology arrived on the scene. When I first started as an editor, we used typewriters, and I hate to say it, but they weren't even correction typewriters. And so technology coming onto the scene had a huge impact on both writing. Word processing came into existence, which meant that authors weren't composing at a typewriter or sitting at a pad of paper with pen or pencil. But then of course, the way we produce books and the way we sell them and market them and read them, of course. So now 70% of all books are bought through Amazon. Wow. And that means that a lot of bookstores went out of business. Some of the bookstore chains went out of business. And so the industry has changed a lot with respect to how people buy books and where people buy books. But it has also changed from the inside in the sense that because self-publishing has become so easy, first of all, and then prevalent, secondly, 4,000 new books are published every day.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So even the major publishers have a hard time. It's just a different world in an environment like that, taking a new book and having it stand out in the market. So a number of different options for writers have come onto the scene, and that includes self-publishing with all of the resources one needs to do a good book yourself, and that means hiring an editor and hiring a designer and having someone help you do the work to make sure that your book is high quality content and visually appealing. But then also it is, there are hybrid publishers now, and that's where I would put Bold Story Press, where we, the editors with whom I work and the designers have many, many years of experience in professional publishing. And so we can work with our authors to help them take their draft and turn it into a book that is polished and amazing, and then we can edit and design it and publish it for them in a way that that is professional and a book they can be proud of. Instead of traditional publishing, they pay the costs up front of design and editorial, etc., and then give you, the author, a 15% royalty. With our business model, we ask the author to share in some of the risk at the beginning of the process. And so the author pays a flat fee to us to help cover editorial and design. And then instead of keeping 85% and giving the author 15%, we give the author 80% and we keep 20%. So it's flipping the business model a little bit on its head, but it's a way to publish a professionally published book.
I love that. And how do you decide what clients you take on at Bold Story Press?
Well, they have to be women.
Yes.
And I should tell you that the reason for that, the reason I decided that in the end, was because during those years that I worked on my business, Bold in Business, and read so much about empowerment and for women, I realized that there is a male bias in the world that extends beyond, just the corporate culture, and it exists in media, it exists in publishing, it exists everywhere you look. And in the publishing world, it's still true that 8 out of the 10 best-selling books are authored by men. The number of books that win awards each year have always been dominated by the awards have always been dominated by male authors. And that was in part because the publishing houses were sending the male authored manuscripts to be reviewed, and not necessarily the female authored. And so in those 32 years that I was in the industry, and I loved those years, but I realized just recently that I unwittingly perpetuated that male bias in the industry, and that I wanted to do something about that. Given our current political climate, I'm also a big believer that the world would be a better place if 50% of the voices in the world were women's voices.
Yes,
And,
yes.
Right? And I mean, in politics, in teaching, in media, everywhere.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to make up, by focusing on women's stories and putting them out into the world. We do, of course, reject books. We don't accept all books that come into us. So the book has to be well written, and it has to be interesting, but it also has to, we believe it has to add some value to the world, either by helping others, or by inspiring others, or entertaining others. So we've had to turn down some books that were well written, but we just didn't feel like they added something positive to the world. So that's our criteria.
Interesting. And are you both nonfiction and fiction, or do you have a preference?
We are both. Yes.
Okay, great.
And so right now, most of the books I receive over the transom are memoirs, books written by entrepreneurs for the business market, and novels.
Great. Wonderful. I want to touch on something that you started to talk about here a few minutes ago, and this is a statistic you have on your site, and I think definitely relates to some of the comments you just made. A survey KPMG did of 3,000 working and college women. 60% of them said they plan to be a senior leader one day, and 50% plan to serve on a board. But the reality of what really that translates to is only 14% of our senior business leaders are women, and only 19% have sat on corporate boards. Talk about, your passion, continue to talk about your passion around that and some of the things that you've seen through your career.
I think if there's one thing, if I had a magic wand and there was one thing I could change for all women that would impact their success in the world, it would be to remove the onus of perfectionism. Perfectionism is a challenge that tends to be gender specific. Men tend not to struggle with perfectionism, which is interesting. But
so why? I mean, obviously, I'm sure done a ton of reading and work on this. Why is that?
Well, I have done a ton of reading, and I have my own personal opinions on this too, having raised a son and watched my sisters all have daughters. So watching the different ways, even we, you know, as enlightened kind of feminist mothers, perpetuated some cultural norms that one of them is that young girls are taught to they're rewarded when they sit quietly at their desk and get straight A's and help the teacher, and they are modest and a team player, and they take care of others around them emotionally, making sure that no one's feelings are hurt, etc. And boys, and my son was definitely one of these boys, at a young age aren't always entirely in control of their bodies and their mouths and their, you know, and my son would do cartwheels around the room. He couldn't even sit still. And so the teacher with the boys would set the bar much, much lower. And they were taught and had for them reinforced that they could do any number of things and be okay. But girls were taught that in order to be rewarded and in order to be held up as a model to other girls, they needed to be perfect. And that is a tough responsibility, you know, to put on anybody. But so many of us carry it forward into our lives, and it affects our confidence. It affects our ability to take risks. And boy, if I could just get rid of it for all womankind, it would be huge.
I know. It's my life's work too. So that's I love talking about this. I'm not, you know, it's like there's did you read The Confidence Code by chance, Emily?
I did. I love their work. Yeah.
Right. So good. And they have a book, I think 5 or so years ago, they published similar research, but they built the book for girls. So Confidence Code for Girls. And I can't tell you how many friends with, you know, younger daughters that I've given that book to. It just, I think their work and research was so important.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't fully answer your question. The reason women are not on boards and in the C-suite is because of the perfectionism that holds them back from taking risks. And if you are going to drive a business, if you are going to drive growth and innovation in a business, you must take risks. And that means being okay with failing and, you know, learning how to succeed graciously. But if you can't take the risks, and that's where the perfectionism gets in our way, then you're not going to get there. You're not going to make it. And that I think is what happens between the time that women write that on a survey, yes, this is where I want to be in life, and get there or don't get there.
Yeah. So true. I could talk about this all day. Yes. Okay. Well, I appreciate the work you continue to do in your business, Bold in Business. Are you still running programs under that brand?
I'm not.
Okay.
So I'm fully
focused on publishing.
I am. Yeah.
Good. That's wonderful. That's exciting. Any examples of clients that you've had as you built your publishing company over the last 6 months or so? Just any stories of any particular authors that have come to you that you were particularly moved by?
Oh, thank you for this question, because yes, there is. So because we just, you know, got started, we are in the process of signing our first round of books. And we just signed our 7th book this week.
Congrats.
Thank you. One of my authors, she also took the class with me. I also teach a class about publishing that teaches writers about the different options. And so at the end of the class, if you want to go off and publish it yourself, you have a lot more information to do that. But one of my authors in the class is 82 years old.
Oh, wow.
And she had been married to an artist of I think some acclaim, and for many years had talked about wanting to write this children's book. It's called Chattahoochee Cats, and this is the having to do with the Chattahoochee River and down in Georgia. And her kids, and I can totally see how this might happen, because I know that I'm sure that there have been times when I've done this with my own mother, and I can see my son doing it to me, may have said, "Oh yeah, Mom, okay, yeah, someday you're going to write a book," and it wasn't happening. And she took this class, and she had the full draft, and we read the book and loved it and offered her a contract. And when she went back to her children, they were stunned. And so here she is at 82 years old, and her kids are so proud of her and so excited for her. And I know that two of her sons pulled their resources and said, "Mom, for Christmas, we're going to pay for the illustrations for your book." I mean, I just love this story. So it's a great book, and it's fulfilling this woman's sort of life dream, and it's allowing her to experience this, I don't know, this beautiful admiration coming from others in her life. I just love that story.
That is beautiful. I love that too. Well, I have no doubt you'll have many, many more stories like that as you continue to grow the business. Talk a little bit, Emily, about some of the things, obviously continuing to sign authors and find amazing authors. What else are you excited about for the upcoming year?
In some ways, Felina, this work feels like mission work for me. Of course, it's a business, and of course, I want to and intend to make money, but I feel so passionately about the importance of helping women to own their power and own their stories and share them, because I think that women learn from each other. When we want to do something in life, we look for a model, a role model, and if we can find one, preferably a woman, and look at the way she did it, and then tweak that to make it our own. And I think as many stories as we can gather and share that show how women dealt with what life gave them, and built a life that is a story that they believe has value and lessons for others. I'm just convinced that it will change the world. So it's not just about having more books with women's names on them in Amazon's database. It is about just a process of women coming together and owning their incredible stories and encouraging each other to reach for more.
I love that. I have no doubt you will you will change the world with the work that you're doing, Emily. If someone's listening to this and they're like, I have a book in me, I want to connect with Emily, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is to go to my website at boldstorypress.com and just click on Contact Us, and that will bring you right to me. And I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, fantastic. I already have a few people in mind as we talk to send your way that do have very unique perspectives and stories. So good stuff. I love it. I love it. Well, Emily, thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. I'm really excited to share your journey.
Oh, thank you so much, Belina. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.